Hi, Leo. This love reading already feels incredibly intense. It feels like someone is finally starting to realize that if they stay silent for too long, they could genuinely lose you. This person has been living inside old fears for a very long time. Old wounds, old hesitation, even parts of themselves they never really wanted to face. But lately, something has been shifting inside them. They can feel that Leo energy is no longer standing still. You're changing, calmer, harder to read, and maybe not waiting the way you used to anymore. And I think that's the part that's really shaking them. Why did it take the thought of losing you for them to finally understand how much you truly meant to them? Because the more they watch you from a distance, the harder it becomes to pretend that this was ever just some ordinary connection. There's something about Leo's energy that keeps pulling this person back for one more look. Even when they try to stay busy, try to stay quiet, try to act like this connection isn't affecting them that deeply, there are still these strange little moments that find them in the silence. Like driving alone after a long day. Streetlights sliding across the window, their phone face down on the seat beside them, and somehow, out of nowhere, they're thinking about you again without even understanding why. The sun card shows up here almost like a force they can't ignore anymore. Not just because you stand out, but because around your energy, they feel more like themselves. Maybe this person got used to shallow connections, relationships that only lived on the surface, conversations that never really touched anything real. But you were different. You made them feel seen in a way that was both terrifying and impossible to walk away from. And the strange part is, the more distance they try to create, the stronger they feel pulled back toward you. The Ace of Wands carries this feeling of emotion that's been suppressed for way too long, like a fire that never fully burned out. Maybe they tried convincing themselves this was temporary, just attraction, just curiosity, just a passing feeling. But time didn't make it disappear. If anything, the silence only made everything grow louder inside them. And lately, this person's intuition feels stronger than ever. They can feel the shift happening in you. Leo isn't standing in the same emotional space anymore. It feels like you're slowly pulling your energy away from the places that once exhausted you. You may not even be saying anything at all, but sometimes a person's silence can echo inside someone else louder than words ever could. The Judgment card feels like an emotional awakening here. This person is starting to ask themselves the questions they used to avoid. Why did they keep running from something that felt this real? Why do they always think about you during their weakest moments? And why is it that the harder they try to move on, the more present you seem in their life? Maybe they once believed they had more time, that you would still be there, still patient, still open-hearted the way you used to be. But lately, nothing feels certain to them anymore. And that realization seems to be stirring panic inside their heart in a very quiet way. The Six of Cups carries such a nostalgic energy here. This person misses you more than they let on. There are moments when they just sit there for a long time, thinking about old conversations, a certain look in your eyes, a small touch, or simply the strange sense of peace they felt whenever they were near you. You feel like a memory they've never really been able to close the door on. And what confuses them the most is, even after trying to move forward in their own way, part of them still keeps returning to the same emotional place. Maybe this isn't the moment when everything gets spoken out loud yet, but the energy here feels like someone slowly losing the ability to keep running from what they truly feel, and this may only be the beginning of everything that's starting to change inside them. Because the more this person allows themselves to feel this connection, the more they begin to see you in a completely different light, not just as someone they're attracted to, not just as a passing feeling that touched their heart for a moment and disappeared, but almost like someone who could completely change their life if they truly let you in. The Two of Cups carries this feeling of two energies finally recognizing something familiar within each other. There's something about the connection between you that feels effortless to them. The kind of connection where they don't have to work so hard to feel understood, where they don't constantly have to explain themselves, where they don't need to wear another version of themselves just to be loved. And maybe what moves them the most is the feeling that you somehow see the real them, even when they still don't fully know how to show that side to the world. Some people enter a person's life just to create noise, but your energy feels more like a slow-burning fire, quiet, deep, and still lingering long after everything else has gone silent again. The Emperor and Empress showing up together makes the energy between the two of you feel incredibly rare. Not codependent, more like two people who already have worlds of their own, but somehow become stronger standing side by side. And this person is beginning to realize something important. You didn't come into their life to save them. You simply inspired them to become a better version of themselves without even trying. And honestly, sometimes that feels even scarier than love. Because when someone truly inspires you, you can't keep living the same way anymore. Lately, this person may have started imagining the future more than they expected to. Not in some unrealistic fantasy kind of way. More in these quiet, ordinary moments. A peaceful room after a long day. Soft laughter in the kitchen late at night. A trip that doesn't have to be perfect, as long as the right person is there beside them. The Four of Wands carries this sense of peace they rarely feel with anyone else. You make them think about home in a way they can't fully explain. Not necessarily a place. More like the feeling of finally lowering their guard without fearing they'll be hurt for it. And for someone who spent so long trying to control every emotion they feel, that kind of experience can be overwhelming in its own way. There's something about Leo's energy that makes this person feel alive again. You may not even realize it, but the way you keep moving through difficult seasons, the way you continue protecting your light even during your hardest days, has quietly made them admire you more than you know. The King of Wands shows up here as an attraction that goes far beyond physical appearance. It's your presence. The way you walk into a room without trying to demand attention, yet people still feel your energy the moment you enter. This person is deeply drawn to the confidence you carry. Not the kind that feels flawless or untouchable, but the kind that comes from someone who's been through pain and still chose to keep a warm heart afterward. And sometimes they catch themselves wondering, if the two of you were truly standing on the same side, how different could life actually feel? The Ten of Pentacles brings this feeling of emotional depth that surprises even them. This no longer feels temporary. Something here is slowly turning into the desire to build, to create stability, to genuinely be present in each other's lives. But as these emotions become harder to deny, their fears seem to wake up too in a very quiet way. Because the more they realize how important you are to them, the more they understand their heart is no longer calm enough to pretend this connection means nothing. And maybe that was the moment everything inside them started becoming more chaotic. Not loud chaos, more like the feeling of standing between two versions of themselves. One version still wanting to stay inside an old comfort zone, and another version slowly growing tired of living so far away from what they truly feel. The Devil card shows up here almost like invisible chains that kept this person trapped inside an unhealthy emotional cycle for far too long. Maybe it was an old relationship, a connection built around control, or simply fears they never truly healed from. Someone may have taught them that love always had to feel exhausting, like there always needed to be drama, control, a constant need to prove their worth just to feel chosen. And after staying inside that kind of energy for so long, they almost forgot what a peaceful connection was supposed to feel like, until they met you. And the strange thing is, Leo never entered their life through force. You didn't beg them to stay. You didn't manipulate their emotions. You never made them feel trapped. But somehow, the freedom in your energy started making them notice all the places where they had been emotionally trapped for years. The Seven of Swords carries this feeling of things left unsaid for far too long. This person may have hidden a lot, the pressure they've been carrying, relationships that drained them emotionally, or even the way they kept trying to convince themselves that staying with what felt familiar was safer than facing what they truly felt for you. Sometimes people don't walk away because they feel nothing. Sometimes they walk away because the feeling is too real enough to understand that it could completely change their life if they fully stepped into it. And not everyone is ready for that kind of change right away. Lately, it feels like this person has been seeing things more clearly after a lot of very long nights. Nights where the room becomes so quiet, they can hear every thought inside their own head, their phone lighting up and going dark again, an old song randomly playing while they're driving. A tiny moment, but somehow it pulls them back to thoughts of you almost instantly. The Justice card feels like a slow awakening, but a very honest one. This person is beginning to realize they can't keep blaming circumstances forever. They can't keep living according to everyone else's expectations, while their heart keeps drifting further away from that life. And the more they try to ignore their intuition, the heavier everything inside them begins to feel. There may have been people around them who caused them to question this connection. Voices that made them hesitate, relationships that pulled them away from themselves. But sometimes, when someone truly begins waking up emotionally, they stop seeing life through the same eyes they once did. The Death card here doesn't feel frightening. It feels more like an old layer of skin slowly peeling away. An older version of themselves no longer fits the person they're becoming. Thoughts that once made them feel safe now feel suffocating. Relationships they once clung to now leave them feeling strangely empty after every conversation. And the deeper they move through this transformation, the more they realize that what they've been searching for all this time may not exist where they once believed it would. The World card carries the feeling of a cycle quietly coming to an end. Not everything falls apart all at once. Sometimes a person leaves an old chapter very slowly, very silently. But inside them, everything has already changed. And maybe what confuses them most right now is that the more they release these old energies, the stronger their connection to you seems to become in ways they still can't fully explain. It's almost like after spending so long living inside noise, they're finally starting to hear what their heart has been trying to say all along. And in so many of those quiet moments, they've been thinking about you far more than you realize. The Page of Swords carries the energy of someone quietly watching from a distance, not in a controlling way, more like someone who always wonders if you're okay, how your life has been lately, how much you've changed since the last time they truly felt close to you. Sometimes they may just sit there looking at an old photo, pausing a little too long on a story, or unconsciously searching for traces of you in the middle of an ordinary day. And what keeps pulling their eyes back to you is realizing that after everything you've been through, you didn't stay stuck. You changed, but not in a way that made you lose yourself. You changed like someone who walked through pain and slowly learned how to rise again with a stronger heart. The Queen of Wands makes Leo's energy in this reading feel incredibly magnetic. There's something about you that carries its own light, even when you're not trying to show it. You probably still have difficult days, still carry quiet moments no one else sees. But the way you continue moving forward, the way warmth still remains in your eyes after everything, that's what keeps drawing this person back in. And the more they watch you grow, the more deeply they begin looking at themselves. It almost feels like you've unintentionally become a mirror reflecting the parts of themselves they once avoided, not because you tried to change them, but because your presence makes them realize they want to live more honestly with themselves too. The Star card carries such healing energy here. You feel like someone who appeared right when they were beginning to lose their emotional direction. Not to save them from everything, but to remind them that somewhere inside, they still have the ability to hope, to love, to change. Sometimes this person looks at you with a feeling that's part admiration and part sadness they can't quite explain, because they realize you're slowly becoming the version of yourself they once wished they could become too. More peaceful, more confident, less dependent on outside validation. The Nine of Pentacles makes your energy feel deeply independent in their eyes. You no longer carry the energy of someone waiting for another person to complete them. And strangely enough, that's exactly what makes them more afraid of losing you than ever before. Because when someone truly begins loving their own life, they usually stop staying in places that keep hurting their heart over and over again. And maybe for the first time, this person is realizing something very clearly. If they wait too long, your life will continue moving forward without them. And realizing that sometimes becomes enough to awaken emotions that have been buried for a very long time. The Strength card feels like a deep inner shift happening inside them now. This no longer feels like impulsive desire or the need to possess someone. It feels more like the desire to become better before truly stepping toward the person they love. Lately, it seems like they've been trying to face themselves more honestly, facing old selfish patterns, the ways they used silence at the wrong moments, the times fear made their decisions for them. And the stronger they see you becoming after everything, the more they realize these feelings never truly disappeared. They were simply sitting quietly beneath the surface, until your growth unexpectedly awakened all of those emotions again in a way they never saw coming. And when a person can no longer deny their own heart, everything inside them usually begins to shift very deeply. Not everyone notices the exact moment their life starts changing direction. Sometimes it begins with something much quieter, just feeling exhausted with the version of themselves they've been living as for too long. Tired of pretending everything is fine. Tired of repeating emotional cycles that never really lead anywhere. Tired of living according to other people's expectations while their own heart grows quieter and quieter inside them. The Chariot feels like an energy pushing this person toward a choice. No more standing in the middle. No more delaying forever. It feels like they're entering a phase where they've started questioning themselves deeply during the moments when they're completely alone. Like driving late at night, an old song playing softly on the radio, the city lights still glowing outside, while inside they feel strangely empty. And somewhere in the middle of all those thoughts, they realize the one person who keeps returning to their mind is you. Not in a chaotic or obsessive way. More like a quiet awareness that some part of their heart has always been moving toward you, even while they kept trying to walk in another direction. The King of Swords carries the energy of clarity after being pulled too far by emotions and circumstances for a very long time. This person is beginning to see things more honestly now. They're seeing the moments they weren't truthful with themselves, the decisions they made only to avoid facing reality, the times they chose silence instead of speaking what their heart truly wanted. And the more they understand themselves, the harder it becomes to stay connected to things that no longer make their soul feel alive. Lately, it feels like they've been quietly removing a lot from their life. Certain relationships, old habits, thought patterns that kept them trapped inside fear for years. Not because everything changed overnight, but because something inside them changed first. The Eight of Cups carries the image of someone walking away from what feels familiar. Even while carrying emotions, they still don't fully know how to explain. And sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving an old relationship behind. Sometimes the hardest part is accepting that an old version of yourself has to be left behind too. And that may be exactly what this person is learning right now. They're beginning to understand that staying in places that slowly disconnect them from their real emotions is no longer the life they want to keep choosing. There's something in your energy that makes them want to live more honestly, to love in a more mature way, to move toward their feelings instead of constantly running from them. The Wheel of Fortune feels like a slow shift beginning to happen in their life. Maybe at one point they believed this connection was temporary. Just a phase, just a feeling that would eventually fade with time. But the more they tried moving forward, the more every emotional path somehow seemed to lead them back to the same person, back to the same eyes. The same energy that refuses to let their heart fully settle into silence again. And what's important here is, this time, they don't seem to want to run from that feeling anymore. The Strength card appears again, but this kind of courage feels very different. Not courage to conquer someone, but courage to finally be honest with themselves, to admit they miss you, to admit you've affected them far more deeply than they once realized, to admit that sometimes simply seeing you doing okay brings both relief and sadness to their heart at the same time. It feels like this person is standing very close to a major inner decision now, a decision no longer led by fear, but by truths their heart has stayed silent about for far too long. And maybe that's why everything between the two of you suddenly feels like it's moving into a much deeper emotional space than before. Because once a person stops running from their own heart, the things they buried deepest inside themselves usually begin rising to the surface. At first, it may only show up in very small ways. A sudden wave of missing you in the middle of the day. A silence that lingers a little longer after seeing you. Or that strange ache they can't fully explain when they imagine that one day, you might truly walk out of their life for good. But little by little, everything starts becoming stronger. The Tower card feels like the moment an emotional wall inside them finally begins to crack. Not some loud, dramatic collapse all at once. More like the feeling of someone becoming too emotionally exhausted to keep lying to themselves anymore. Some truths, the deeper they're buried, the more they seem to find their way back during the most vulnerable moments. And lately, it feels like this person has been experiencing a lot of those moments. Sleepless nights lasting longer than usual. Thoughts returning once everything around them becomes quiet. Their heart reacting more intensely every time your name appears somewhere unexpectedly. Maybe they once believed they had complete control over their emotions. But this connection doesn't seem to follow the same emotional logic they once used to protect themselves. The Moon card carries the energy of feelings hidden away for far too long. Emotions they never spoke out loud, fears they always pretended they didn't have, and deeper wounds that convinced them distance was safer than truly opening their heart to someone. But maybe the hardest thing about emotions is that you can stay silent with the whole world, yet it becomes almost impossible to stay silent with your own heart forever. And the more they try to keep everything buried in darkness, the heavier their inner world begins to feel. There are moments when this person looks at you and realizes something important. You never tried to force them to change. Leo simply kept being Leo, living honestly within your own light. And somehow, that alone became the very thing that slowly started breaking down all the walls they built inside themselves. The Sun card appears here, almost like light reaching the places they spent years trying to avoid. You make them see what genuinely makes them happy, what's merely an old emotional habit, what feels like real connection, and what was only loneliness disguised as love. And sometimes emotional awakenings don't arrive through dramatic conversations. Sometimes they arrive very quietly, like sitting alone in the car after a long day, watching city lights reflect across the window, and for the first time truly admitting to themselves, I miss this person more than I ever realized. There's a deep emotional transformation tied to this Scorpio energy. It feels like this person is moving through a phase where they can no longer return to the version of themselves they used to be. Something inside them changed completely after connecting with you. And even when they try continuing life like nothing happened, part of them still feels like something deeply important is missing. What's even more significant is, this transformation isn't only making them see their feelings for you more clearly, it's making them see themselves more clearly too. The places where they lacked emotional maturity, the moments they chose fear instead of honesty, the times their ego spoke louder than what they truly felt. The Temperance card feels like slow healing, deep healing. Not the kind of emotions that swing wildly from one extreme to another anymore. Everything feels like it's slowly finding balance again after such a long period of emotional chaos inside them. And maybe somewhere inside this quiet space, they're finally beginning to understand that what they truly wanted was never perfection. It was a connection where they could fully be themselves, without feeling the need to keep running anymore. And now that the final illusions are beginning to fall away, it feels like their heart may not want to stay silent much longer either. Because some feelings, once they've finally been faced honestly for the first time, can never fully return to what they were before. This person seems to have gone too far in their inner journey to keep pretending you don't matter to them anymore. And lately, it feels like everything inside them has been pushing them to do something. Not some dramatic action overnight. More like the desire to finally break the silence between the two of you in a more honest way than before. The Fool card carries the energy of an emotional step forward, but also a very vulnerable one. Like someone standing at the edge of a completely new chapter in their life, still a little afraid, still unsure where any of this could lead. But for the first time in a very long time, they want to trust their feelings more than their fear. It feels like they've spent a lot of time thinking about what they would even say to you. Typing something out, then deleting it. Opening the chat window, then closing it again. Picking up their phone late at night, only to stare at your name for a few extra seconds before putting it back down. And the reason they've hesitated for so long isn't because they don't feel this connection. It's because they know that once they truly open their heart, things between the two of you may never go back to the way they were before. The Knight of Cups feels like someone slowly learning how to express emotions instead of hiding them away. No longer wanting to love you silently. No longer wanting to stand at a distance while watching your life continue without them. And it feels like this person is beginning to understand something very deeply. Sometimes the greatest regret isn't rejection. Sometimes it's never being brave enough to tell the truth about what you felt. And the more they think about you, the more this connection begins to feel worth taking a real emotional chance on. The Ace of Cups feels like emotions that have been held back for far too long, finally finding somewhere to flow, not impulsive emotions. Something softer than that. Something real beneath all the emotional walls they spent so much time building around themselves. Maybe this person isn't perfect. Maybe some fears still haven't disappeared completely. But this time, it feels like they no longer want fear making decisions for their heart anymore. There's also something between the two of you that feels lighter now after all the emotional tension that came before this. Almost like the sky slowly beginning to clear after an endless storm. The Eight of Wands carries the feeling of movement, a conversation, an unexpected sign, a moment where the emotional distance between you no longer feels as heavy as it once did. And what feels different now is, the energy no longer feels avoidant. It feels more like someone becoming exhausted from constantly running in circles around their own emotions. Exhausted from pretending they're fine while their heart keeps reacting in the exact opposite way. And honestly, you may feel this shift before a single word is ever spoken aloud. Through the way they look at you, through the softness in their energy, or through that quiet voice in your intuition whispering, something is changing. The Sun card appears one last time in this reading like a warm light after such an emotional journey between the two of you. Not every story has to end perfectly right away to hold meaning. Sometimes the most beautiful moment is simply when two people finally stop running from what they truly feel. And it feels like this person is getting very, very close to that moment now. A moment where they no longer want to love you silently, but want to truly be present in your life as the most honest version of themselves. And maybe that's what makes this connection feel so different, Leo. Not because everything was always easy. Not because the two of you never went silent, never missed each other, never lost yourselves inside your own emotions along the way. But because after all the distance, the confusion, and all the moments spent trying to deny what the heart truly felt, something still kept quietly, pulling both of you back toward a deeper truth inside yourselves. Sometimes deep feelings don't arrive loudly. They arrive slowly, softly. Like suddenly thinking about someone in the middle of an ordinary day and realizing the feeling never truly disappeared at all. And maybe this journey didn't only change them. Maybe it changed you too. You learned how to love yourself more deeply, how to stop dimming your own light just to make someone stay. And maybe that growth is exactly what made Leo's energy become beautiful in an entirely different way. Some connections enter our lives just to create noise, but others quietly awaken something inside the heart after years of emotional silence. And sometimes, what stays with a person forever isn't grand promises. It's the feeling of being truly seen by someone. And honestly, I can't help but wonder, have you ever met someone where no matter how hard you tried to move forward, part of your heart still kept finding its way back to them in a way you could never fully explain? And if these kinds of gentle readings resonate with you, maybe somewhere further down the road, we'll find each other here again through more stories, more cards, and more quiet moments made for Leo. But for now, just let everything settle slowly. Because sometimes the most beautiful part isn't knowing exactly what's going to happen next. It's finally allowing your heart to be honest enough to feel what it's been trying to say all along.